What do you know? It's Friday Reads. Hi, this is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. I'm here today to do a Friday Reads, which really kind of serves as a month of May wrap up because I haven't done one of these in a few weeks. So I have my little list of notes and I just wanted to talk about briefly what I have read since the last time I wrapped you up, or I wrapped myself up, wrapped up my reading. The first book I want to talk about is a memoir by Julianna Margulies called Sunshine Girl, An Unexpected Life. And I didn't know what to expect when I started reading this book because I don't know that much about Julianna Margulies other than, I've seen her in ER and I've seen her in The Good Wife. And we have recently done re-watches of them. So I've, been aware of her and seen her acting for many years. And she's just kind of an enigma. And what I found out from reading the memoir is that she had a really unconventional childhood. She's almost exactly my age. And she also had parents who divorced and split up and moved at all different places, all places around the globe. So she lived in England and France, and she went to boarding school. And so she just had this really unconventional life with parents who were also coming to terms with their own lives and trying to figure out who they were and didn't always pay that much attention to the kids or what the kids needed in the process of their own psychological maturation. So it was a really interesting look at her life. I thought it was really introspective. I believe she wrote it herself and didn't have a ghostwriter because she talked a lot about writing instruction books like by Anne Lamott and other people really trying to learn how to write her own memoir. So I thought it was strong, interesting story. It just took me just a couple of days to get through it. It wasn't very long. And, I like celebrity memoirs sometimes if I'm invested in the characters I've seen these people play, or I've, been watching their art for years. I'm interested in the life behind the art. So I thought it was about a 4-star read. I finally finished the Country Girls Trilogy by Edna O'Brien. Sean, the book Maniac, and I read it over the course of many months. We, read them slowly and then talked about them every week. And the first 2 novels in the trilogy I thought were so beautiful and all about coming of age and the artist's eye, because the Kathleen, or she's also known as Kate, is very artistic. She sees the world almost through a writer's gaze. She's always noticing, the landscape and the interactions of people, and she's just so intuitive, it seems, and you really get into her head and see what her life is like. This country village in Ireland. She has a pretty mean alcoholic father and a mother who is very kind, but she's not really capable of standing up to the father, and just not capable. And there are other people in the town that are in love with Kate's mother and also kind of project that onto Kate too. She has a really headstrong and willful best friend named Baba, and she spends a lot of time at Baba's family's house and gets to know those parents. And so these first two novels are like from girlhood, and then they go to convent school and they get kicked out of convent school, and then they start, trying to live more adult lives. And she's, as she gets to be a little bit older of a teenager, she starts attracting the eye of older men and is trying to navigate relationships with these older men, one in her village and one that she meets in Dublin, who has a big impact on her later in her life. I really enjoyed the journey of these 2 novels most. The 3rd novel I did enjoy too, but it was about what happened to Baba and Kate after they get married. And let's just say at the front that it's really not a happy journey for anyone. And the point of view shifts from just Kate's point of view to Baba having her own chapters and then a 3rd-person omniscient narrator instead of a 1st-person Kate. And it just changes the dynamic completely. So I am so glad that we read this, and Sean and I will be reading her memoir, Edna O'Brien's memoir, in November when it's Nonfiction November. On top of reading all of her collected short stories, I feel like we have really delved into the writing career of Edna O'Brien, and it's very strong. I finished the memoir about chronic illness called Bless the Birds by Susan Tweit. She is an essayist, and her husband was an artist and a writer and a teacher, and he gets brain tumor. And so the whole book, the memoir, it goes back and forth, but it's about his diagnosis and what they went through. And also they decide to make a last trip called their honeymoon trip, a driving trip from Colorado, Salida, Colorado, up to San Francisco and then up to Oregon, and just this whole big loop. So I'm not sure if this completely worked, but the time shifts back and forth between the trip and then her remembering the steps of their meeting, marriage, and then his eventual diagnosis. And there was some repetition. There were some things that I definitely think could have been edited a little bit, but just she was completely honest. And it wasn't all just, happy remembrances. They had a lot of fights. She was also, resentful and angry at times because of, how much care she had to give to him at times because, his whole personality changed, and there were medicine regimes, and there was a lot of detail about what medicines he was on. And I'm not sure that it completely balanced out in terms of the narrative, but it was also a pretty fairly quick read. And it was very, very introspective and kind and tender, and you really feel her loss and also their deep love for each other over the years. I finished the first in the Alexandria Quartet by Lawrence Durrell called Justine. I'm reading this with Teresa, who is a great commenter on many, many videos for many different content makers, booktubers. Anyway, she is so fun to read books with. And we got through the first novel. It's about pre-World War II Alexandria, Egypt, and the main character is an Irish school teacher who happens to be there. And he starts up falling in love with a couple of women, and all of the relationships that are in this circle, and there's jealousy and paranoia and tension, and also the atmosphere of Alexandria. And you can smell the air and see the bruises under some of the characters' eyes. I mean, he's such an astute observer of the way people look and the way they behave and what their motivations may or may not be. And the whole first book, he's writing this memory or this remembrance of this specific period of time with all these different characters. And now we've moved on to the next book that's called Balthazar, which is still written from the perspective of the narrator of the Irish school teacher, but the influence of Balthazar on the actual memoir. It's very complicated, but I'm definitely glad we're reading that. It's like nothing I've read before, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I finished Stephen Fry's Mythos, The Greek Myths Retold. It was an audiobook narrated by Stephen Fry, and he has this amazing performance voice, and it's all about the origins of Greek mythology, but told as though it were a real thing, and all about how all of the gods were born, and then all the main myths that came out. It was quite involved. I don't know how much of it I'll remember, but he was very good about doing like word origins and common words that we know now that came out of these myths. And it was really fun. And he's just doing it with such a spirited, happy, performance that it was really fun to listen to. I also finished Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and this was a very short novel. I call it a cousin to Never Let Me Go, but it is about an artificial intelligence, and it's about this girl named Josie who is ill, and she is a teenager, and she needs a companion, and her family buys for her an artificial friend named Klara. The whole story is told in first person from Klara's perspective as, an artificial intelligence. Excuse me. And just some, I don't want to give the plot away at all because it was a really interesting plot, just to see the way that Klara perceives and is able to articulate what she's seeing and how that affects her behavior towards the humans that she's been entrusted to. So it's kind of a dark future, like a near future where, you know, things aren't going well in humanity, and they've used science to completely separate groups of people based on intelligence and based on genetics. So I won't give any more away than that, but I did really enjoy and think it was really well written. What is our responsibility to the things we create? It has parallels to Frankenstein. Really interesting. Glad I read it. It was not my favorite Ishiguro, but I definitely will be thinking about it for a long time. Last night I finished a novel called Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Balli, Kaur, Jaswal, and I thought this was handled really well. I wasn't sure what to expect out of this, if it was, you know, what it would be like, but it's about the Sikh community in England. It's like, and where they all gather is like a suburb of London. And so there's a very strong Sikh community there. The main character is Nikki, who isn't sure she wants, you know, she isn't sure where she fits into the community. She does not want an arranged marriage, but her sister does. And her father has just died. And there are a lot of different agendas from all the different characters. But what happens is she ends up going to teach English, or to teach writing and reading to a group of Punjabi widows at the Sikh community center. And it's being funded by the men who run the community center. But what happens is the women aren't really interested in just learning how to write letters or read. They want to talk about their stories, and they start talking about erotic stories that they've thought of or they've seen, and they take the bare plots of things they've seen and then they turn them into these stories that they tell each other, and they're transcribed, they're recorded and transcribed, and then they start passing these stories around. And it causes a lot of angst amongst the elder men and these young men that go around and try and police the women of the community. And also there's a mystery involving a woman who committed suicide and how Nikki gets into their family to try and figure out why she did what she did. And it was really handled well, but it was written in a light tone. It was written, it handled and was sensitive, but it also wasn't completely dark and bleak. There was a lot of humor, and the characters were broad, yet they were also nuanced, if that makes any sense. But we're reading it for a book club, and I think it's going to be a really good discussion because there was a lot going on that there is to talk about. Plus all the erotic stories themselves were there. So yeah, I liked it, and I really enjoyed the way it was handled. I think that's it. I think that's all I have to talk about for now. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you're here, hi, and I'm going to say goodbye now, and have a good weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.